December 1 is one of them. If you know Charles Stevens, she's our office manager. She would not say the words magical time because we literally have to count every special needs student and categorize every special needs student. And that's one of the things that drives our APT knowledge. Staff-wise, we have 129 certified staff and 101 classified staff. And that is a little bit tricky because our speech pathologists are certified teachers, our occupational and physical therapists are classified staff. So when you're looking at those different positions, not all of them are paraprofessionals in the classified, and not all of the folks in the certified. There's what we would think of as a traditional teachers. Psychologists are also and certified as a state specialist. So this is the big, beautiful thing that happens for us each year. This is called the RDA. This is the results-driven accountability. This is how special education districts across the state get their score. Similar to the ABCD system for schools, we get a level 1, 2, 3, or 4 system. And you received ours on Friday, so it was good timing that we were going to be here. Next week, we are meeting with the state, and actually we will be meeting with Dr. Higginson and Dr. Shepard with our special ed team, so that we can talk about what our scores came out, because we will go through detail on each individual score. This is just an overview of the actual results-driven accountability. Why we'll want to meet with them is 85% of our students with special needs receive their education in the general setting.
I'm sorry, the what?
In the general education setting.
Okay.
So it's really important as we talk about curriculum that we understand and are part of the curriculum development that happens across the board. So you'll see that Lindsay, and Lisa with high ability are all parts of that instructional learning team. When it comes to the results-driven accountability score, we got a level 1. And that's like getting an A. So for us, we're very excited. This is our second year in a row that we've gotten a level 1. And actually, we've gotten one pretty consistently. Here's how it's measured a little bit differently, is that in special education, they put you in like-size groups. So we're in the largest group, and then they are comparing our scores with other schools that are similar to us. There are two parts to an RDA, so that results-driven accountability. The first is compliance and data. What they want to know is, are you compliant on what we call indicators? These are federal indicators that say things like, are you getting stuff done on assessments for initial time? What is your rate of suspension and expulsion of students with special needs? There are all kinds of indicators. You have to be 100% or you're not. So either you get every one right or you fail. And you have what they call a finding. When we look at our compliance and our data, we had one teeny little finding that we'll talk about shortly with the spunky Lindsay Cox, who took the whole thing on and has some awesome news about what we're looking at there. So there are 21 ways to fail by having one student miss one thing. The important thing to remember for us is we've had a tradition of being out of compliance for disproportionality, and we are no longer disproportionate on suspensions and expulsion, and haven't been now. This is our second year. Then the data piece is, are we turning our reports in on time? So you get one score for compliance and data, and then you get a second score of how are your students with special needs doing on statewide assessment testing. And it's pure and simple, and that's why it becomes so important when we talk with Brad and Mindy and the IL department about how we're doing instruction, because 85% of those students are receiving in the general ed setting, and those who are not are receiving specialized curriculum in other places. We have students in high ability that are duly qualified. They're a high ability student and a student with special needs. We have students in intense classrooms, and you got to meet some of our folks last time we were here. We didn't bring students this time since we kind of took over last time we were here a lot longer than we probably intended to be, kind of showing up for the adult folks. So that result index is a big deal. What we found with the RDA, and I'm looking a little bit at Lindsay Cox, because the RDA is a newer assessment. It came out, this is the 4th year they've done it. And she and I went on the 2nd year they had completed this together, and they keep going back to the well and redrawing what they're gonna do for compliance each year. So when we looked at the data and when we looked at the compliance, we had more points than last year, but they lowered our score. And they lowered our score because they added more cells. So each year, things are a little different. It still put us in level 1. It didn't really change things. But it really said that, and we got more scores at 100%. We had 2 areas that weren't 100%, but it lowered our score. Last year, we had 3, and our score was higher. So it's a little funky how that target moves a little bit each year. The results section score moved up. So when we look at results and the curriculum that's in place, the professional learning communities are showing our students with special needs some advantage. In a COVID year, even with us having a lot of things online, we moved up by a point. That's a major deal because many of our students were receiving their special education services through teletherapy. So that's a pretty impressive piece for our teachers and for our staff to show those level of gains on assessments. The other thing that I think was really important is it does include graduation rate of students with special needs. And if you know nationally, that is one of the lower numbers that you hear. And I'm talking about the federal rate, which is a little more stringent. The federal rate across the board in the United States is about 68%. We're at 76, working on 77. So we're about 10% higher than most of the rest of the country in graduation for high school students with special needs. Lastly, that indicator 13 is an area that Lindsay Cox would love to share with you. I will share as Lindsay comes around. She has taken on indicator 13 as a mission, and I don't think I've had quite as much fun as sitting with her and folks from the IDOE to explain where they thought we had missed things and how she explained that they may have missed their evaluation cycle.
So as Tony was mentioning about the different indicators that we are judged on, indicator 13 is completely surrounding transition IEP.
For people watching.
So with transition IEPs, what they really are is for students who are turning age 14 or entering 9th grade, an additional component of the IEP is required. And so what that allows us to do, or challenges us to do, is to help the students start thinking more long-term about their post-secondary goals. And so added components of that transition IEP require a transition assessment to be completed, the summary to be provided in the IEP that identifies the student's strengths, preferences, interests, and needs, academically, as well as employability and independent living skills. So it really takes a good deep dive in the needs of that students besides just that academic component. From that summary then, specific goals are developed for each student that help them, again, think that long-term piece about what do I want to be when I grow up? What kind of career do I want to have? What education and training do I need? And are there additional components related to independent living skills that need to be addressed, again, as we're helping our students get to that post-secondary independent status? Then after all of those goals are developed, an additional part of the IEP is requiring a specific transition service. So what activity are we going to do with our students over the next IEP year to help them continue to develop their goals and work towards that progress? So really fun process. You get to know your students so well through all of this. But when we look at the indicator piece, I want to explain a little bit about how it's judged and how that compliance score is kind of deciphered. So every single one of our IEPs for students who are entering 9th grade, age 14 or above, so we're talking at least 1,200 IEPs across the district. From all of those, 10 IEPs are pulled randomly, and then judged based on these 10 compliance questions. So, in order for an IEP to be considered compliant, we have to mark yes to every single one of these questions. And so, as you can see, if we look at all of these questions, question 1, 100%, question 2, 100%, question 3, 100%. The quality of our IEPs has just absolutely skyrocketed over the last 3 years as we have been really focusing on this indicator. But if you look down at question 7, and this is where Tony will tell you that the state had to color their backups here because I had to challenge some of their reasoning for why they mark these IEPs non-compliant. And as a required component of the transition service, you have to specifically write out in the IEP what that is going to support for the student. So if the student in their post-secondary goal says that they want to be an orthodontist, in the transition service, I have to say that the student will do a job shadow to become an orthodontist, or specifically shadow an orthodontist. If I don't use that word orthodontist in my narrative, it's considered non-compliant. So, anyways, I just wanted to explain that a little bit because that is one of the RDA indicators that we were marked down on this year, and we got a score of 1 out of 5, even though the quality of our IEPs, the work that we're doing with students, all the transition services, and supports that we are putting in place for students, we're doing really, really good. So,
making sure the right words are in the right places for the folks who are doing those assessments was a little silly, because when you would go into the other places on the IEP, would say exactly what we need to say, but because it wasn't in the specific section of that specific area, of that specific IEP, they counted it wrong. And as I said before, you're either 100% right or you're wrong. There is no middle ground. And so I was excited about how far that's come. That transition IEP has been a work in progress. And to get where we are right now, thanks to Lindsay, is amazing. And so I actually saw it as a victory, because if you look at all those 100s on there, they're across the board, except for that one question. Now that helps us focus in on that one question as well.
Kudos really does go to Lindsay Cox. I'm Lindsay Brander. I support our elementary schools and our alternative programs for special education. Lindsay Cox does our secondary programming and our intense programming. Over the last few years, she's really done an amazing job of coaching and supporting our secondary teachers and auditing all of those 1,200 IEPs to ensure that they are in compliance with what we're doing, things that are in the best interest of our students. So I'm going to talk about our Special Education Guiding Coalition. I have notes because I have a tendency to black out when I'm presenting. So our Guiding Coalition is a team of staff, parents, and community members who meet once per month to develop and direct our strategic plan based that we get from things like RDA and surveys. And we also look for opportunities to head off issues before they become bigger problems for us. So you can see this list here. We have a huge team. They're wonderful. We have community support members, we have parents, we have administrators. We have tried to get members from every facet of special education within our community. One of the areas of need that we have identified for our Guiding Coalition task for 2021 is to develop a back-to-school university. We have a relatively inexperienced teaching staff. About a third of our special education teachers are within their first 3 years of teaching. University education doesn't really prepare you super well for teaching special education in the real world. So we have identified some areas of need like writing compliant IEPs, classroom management is a big one, especially coming back full time here in this COVID year. So this summer we're going to run a back-to-school university for our special education staff and support staff, where they can come in and get professional development in these areas without worrying about having to leave their students behind or finding substitutes during the school year. So we're really equipping and empowering them as they move forward into the school year, because if there's one thing we know about how to retain teachers and teacher efficacy, is to ensure that they have the tools that they need to do their job. And when they feel effective, then they stay. Another one is we've developed goals as part of our strategic plan, and just to continue to monitor and move those goals forward. And I will hand it over to Lisa.
All right, so the handout I'm gonna provide you now is actually gonna look really familiar, because when we were here 2 weeks ago and talked about the work of our young adult program, I handed this out at that time too, so I'm so excited, and then Tony told me we were talking about this. So tonight though, I would love to share with you, each of our goals, talk a little bit about them, and then highlight some of the specific, work that we have been able to accomplish since March. So included in the PowerPoint tonight, there are a couple links if you'd like to look at this further. But we have our whole Google Drive in here that just has all of the Guiding Coalition work in it. There was a similar update that we provided in March related to our goals. And then what I'm going to talk to you about tonight is where we are as of October. So as Lindsay mentioned, the Guiding Coalition team really got together, looked at all of the data surrounding special education about 18 months ago. And from all of that information, they honed in on these 6 specific goals and found them to be what we needed to focus on in order not only to continue to improve special education services, but just our district as a whole. So the first goal is related to suspension and discipline. As Tony mentioned at the beginning of the presentation, we are no longer considered significantly disproportionate. And a lot of that has to do with the work related to this goal. So it is specifically developed around supporting suspension to discipline procedures, putting in proactive solutions before we get students to that point of suspension. Okay, so since October, we continue to collaborate and work along with the district team on the equity plan, continuing to help our special education staff become trauma-informed care and have specific training in de-escalation techniques. And then we have implemented a system at the district level where we are continuously monitoring and tracking the number of out-of-school and in-school suspensions within the building, so that again, we have that early warning sign that there may be an issue, so we can put a plan in place to hopefully prevent some of those suspensions or further behavior from occurring. Our second goal is related to the identification of Latinx students. As we know, the rising population of Latinx students in our corporations it keeps going. So we want to make sure that we have the proper procedures and tools in place so that we are properly identifying students, Latinx students for possibly special education. So what we've done since October is again continuing to work along with the district initiatives, making sure that our staff truly understand those SIOP practices. But then we have contracted with Dr. Daniel Ortiz. And we'll begin work with him this spring, specifically related to tools and identification protocols for special education for students who are Latinx. What's his first name? Daniel, sorry. That's all right. Okay.
Dr. Ortiz is kind of a nationally renowned person on identification.
Okay.
When it comes to students whose primary language, first language is not English.
Okay.
And he is just somebody who really, when I've communicated back and forth with him, his thought that we underrepresent that student population was a little shocking to him, because mostly what happens is an over-identification. And so he actually has a tool out. He's willing to come work with us this spring and then help us develop an LCART tool for the second semester of next year, the following spring, to say, are you guys hitting what you think you're hitting? Because what happens with our students who don't speak English as a primary language is we at times don't test those students, or we do a brief assessment based in English, which isn't helping us understand whether they really have a special need or not. It's helping us understand whether they speak their home language well or not. So he's got some cross-battery assessments and an actual tool that will help us.
I'm actually going to jump down to goal 6 next, because as Tony mentioned earlier, 85% of our students with special needs are educated in the general education curriculum. So it's important that for our guiding coalition to really focus on that equitable academic growth and proficiency of our students with disabilities who are serviced in that general education curriculum. So in work with instructional leadership and in being part of their team, along with their rollout of the Wilson Foundation, special education also rolled out Foundation's interventions training. So not only are students getting their tier 1 in that general education classroom, we now have an additional component that is focused on intervention, giving them that reteaching and support right away in those lower grades. We also adopted the Wilson Reading System, which is a very intensive tier 3 intervention for students grades 3 through 12, who are focusing on still that decoding and kind of basic reading skills. We are working with Megan Clark to help educators, special educators, better understand their role in the PLC process. So as they're a part of their grade level or their content team, special educators are getting some additional tools in their toolbox right now about how they can be better assets to those teams and how they can best utilize their time and resources to maximize their services to students. We continue our work with the Accessible Educational Materials Grant through the PACET organization, the state level technical assistance organization that really helps in the development of kind of instructional technology and reducing barriers to education. And so with that, we are, one, starting to educate our staff more on how they can identify students who have a print disability. So it's kind of beyond just that of a reading disability, a student who can comprehend anything that you say to them, but they just can't access that print text to get the information from the book and into their brain on their own. So kind of working on some accessibility tools with that, and then also an app called Co-Writer will help with the writing component of that. I'm going to jump back up a little bit more. So going back up to goal 3, a couple weeks ago we had the pleasure of bringing our young adult program here. And that is one example of the special population programming that we are really working to develop. So we have our 85% of students served in the general education setting, but then we have another 15% that are serviced in more specialized settings. So that includes our emotional disabilities program, starting the new location of that out at Bristol Elementary. As well as our intense intervention classrooms within our buildings across the district. So that goal 3 really focuses on those specific special education components in those specialized programs. Goal 4 then focused on recruitment, retention, and training. And as we talked about, the goal this year is really to focus on that back-to-school university. So again, we're coaching our teachers, we're training our teachers, and ultimately they're going to want to stay with us. So we continue to get feedback from them on a biannual basis. The Guiding Coalition then takes that information and uses that to tweak and formulate our goals as we continue to move forward. One of the biggest pieces of staffing, and if you remember back in, I think, February or March, Lindsay and I were here and talked about this staffing change that we were proposing across the district for paraprofessionals. So after we met with you, we successfully implemented that plan, And we're able to reduce our paraprofessional vacancies from what we had last year, was 47, down to our current, and again, a couple weeks ago, is down to 13 vacancies. So all of those paraprofessional vacancies that were unfilled for literally several years, we successfully transitioned them into more meaningful positions, and I believe onboarded several teachers at the elementary level. And I think if we looked at our overall number of vacancies in special education, we are sitting a lot prettier than we have in a lot of years, and are better able to implement the services to our students.
But there's still vacancies,
There are still some, yes.
and our HR knows that.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
Yep. So, and then the last one, again, goal 5, kind of goes back to that
I'm gonna jump in something. I don't want us to lose the fact on recruitment that we still have a relationship with IUSD, and we're paying for 10 folks in our community who have bachelor's degrees, and we know will stay around here to get their special education. And this is our 3rd, going on our 4th program. So many of the teachers that we have right now in our classrooms, and the reason why we have so many new teachers in special education is because they come through that cohort, and then they agree to teach with the position. That relationship with IUSD is very special and has created a way for us to get some staff who are local, who have relationships with our students.
That has to be, what's the emergency permit? So are they on emergency permit because they're in the special education, they're getting their license, but they've got their bachelor's, is that how that works?
Yeah, they will be this year. Next year is the change.
What happens when that comes?
Do you want me to?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, I probably jumped ahead a
No,
little bit,
no,
but I
right.
like.
So, Indiana, the state of Indiana, both across the podium, got their hands slapped because, in IDEA, we're not supposed to, hand out emergency permits for special education. We want highly skilled, trained staff. So the way that the program in Indiana has worked is that you can apply for an emergency permit, and it can keep getting renewed for up to 3 years as long as you were at some point in time enrolling in a program. For our district, the way that we've done it, they are automatically enrolled into the IUSD program and have the emergency permit. So most of our teachers on emergency permits end up with their licensure within 3 years. The state is now changing it to a transition to teaching program, so you will be awarded this 3-year transition to teaching program as long as the first year you are enrolled in the program. So in working with the Dean of Education at IUSD and the practices that we have used here, we should not be affected by that change in emergency permit status. As long as they sign a contract and work with us for 5 years in the IUSD program.
Yeah, backup folks and things for one of these people, because this is really, some are one-on-one, some it's pretty intense. How does that work as far as, are you guys sharing, like when somebody is out, or how does that work?
You mean if you're looking at the subs?
So I think like any other area right now, if I were to look backwards at the ETA, they would identify we're short teachers everywhere. And many administrators end up subbing. Lindsay and Lindsay often sub in classrooms.
Is that because we don't have subs available? Or
It's a couple of things. One, we don't have subs available, and 2, some of the intense needs of some of the students in those classrooms, whether it be curricular or behavioral, require somebody who has a pretty serious amount of training, and if we have a sub who goes in who doesn't have that, we're not going to assist when that sub could go somewhere else where they can actually.
That's what I was wondering, because I know it's very specialized and intense, and it's got to be really hard to have backup subs. Got one for you, but it is.
All right. So just the last goal really sums up all the work that we're doing. So goal 5 is post-secondary outcomes. So the Guiding Coalition decided that really the goal and the purpose for all the work that we're doing in special education is to be able to say 100% of every student with identified with a disability who attends Elkhart Community Schools will have a post-secondary plan. Whether that be go to college, go to a trade school, have a job, they will have some sort of plan when they leave us from our community. So we talked about a lot of that work last week, or a couple weeks ago with the young adult program. And then we're really starting to hone in on our high school program to identify the trends that are happening there with classes and grades, specifically looking at F, so that we can better support students at that high school and post-secondary level, helping to launch them into not only graduation, but lifelong success.
All right.
I have a question. When you say that some of the students don't have access to text, does that mean that they can understand English, but they can't read it?
Correct.
Okay. And then when you talked about the disproportionate,
So you're the expert in that area.
So we have been, the way that disproportionality really is worked with federally is by using special education. We call it special education funds or federal funds. So when they look at disproportionality across the country, they really target how many students are being suspended, they call it removals, or removals of more than 10 days, which we call an expulsion. So across the country, they look at a school that has more than 10 students in any of what they call a cell, right? So African American, Latinx, they'll look at Asian, they'll look at just special ed in general, they look at every category of special ed. How many kids with speech and language are suspended or expelled? So they look at every one of those cells. We had traditionally seen many years where we were disproportionate in suspensions in under 10 days of our African American. They have to, because it's federal funded pieces, these students in special education, so that's how we track that. I think the addition of making sure that the schools get together after so many suspensions occur to say, wait a minute, we've got to write an FBA and a behavior plan, we need something ahead of time, and then looking at other processes besides just suspension has increased the amount of disproportionality. It may not, and in most cases, it really has increased suspension. In 2019, when we put Pride in place, we saw across the board a 20% decrease in the amount of officers from referrals, just from a general level intervention. So that's why when we start talking about a comprehensive way to look at behavior, EIS becomes so important on looking at just general, what are the expectations of students here in our particular school, and how do we teach that to kids who may or may not have had opportunities to be with 30 people. Not a common thing for many of our students, you know. And I don't know if there's a kindergarten teacher here, but I always equate kindergarten to herding cats for the first two. Many of those students I have. Yep. I'm up next anyway, so I'm in the right spot. Some of you we've gotten to talk with how special education is funded, but there are some folks who have not been on the board when we've talked about this before, and just kind of a good reminder to walk through. Really, there are three areas that we see funding go directly for special education. The first is Part B funds. Part B funds are for students who is federal pass-through funds for identified as students with special needs. The second is this additional pupil count dollar or APC dollars. When we do our ADM, we also then identify, when we do this December 1 count, how many students do we have in each of the different categories, and then we get some state funding for our students with special needs. And then lastly, we have what's called the maintenance of effort. The federal government expects that because we accept the funds, that we spend so many local funds towards special education, and it can never go down unless there are some specific reasons. So we can't say this year we're just going to pay less if we have all of the same costs we had the year before. We have a high-end teacher who is at the top of that salary scale who will leave, and we have somebody come in who's at the bottom, then we can ask for a decrease. We have a student that was at a residential facility that we are paying for, we can ask for a decrease to that. But in general, that's what maintenance of effort is. It's our local match for these federal dollars. In preschool, for our preschool program, we see about $119,000 was our last grant. For the Part B funds, so the federal funds, 3.232.090, that's gonna look significantly higher than last time, by about $500,000, and the only reason is we were disproportionate. You were required to spend some of your funding towards addressing that proportionality. Since we weren't, we were able to have money come back in. Now, we can voluntarily use money towards, they call CEIS, which are early intervening services. Our APC dollars I mentioned a minute ago are the state funds, looking at our December 1 count, how many students do we have in certain areas? And then our maintenance effort is almost over. So when we look at what do APC dollars do, you'll notice that I mentioned we had a little over 2,500 students. If you add those numbers up, you're going to get more than 2,500 students. That's because as little Tony qualifies as a student with a learning disability, I may also have a disability in speech. So I count in both areas. Right. And you'll notice that APC level 1 is in addition to our ADM count. So for every student who is moderate, severe, on the autism spectrum, those students generate an additional $9,000. Our students with speech, that's that category 3, they generate $500 for additional expenses for us to provide services. The majority of our students follow in that level 2. So there's students with severe learning disabilities, mild cognitive disabilities, those kind of things. And that's really not true. The majority of our students follow in level 3 speech. But as the primary, you'll notice it's 94. You'll see non-public. When we have a non-public school that is in our school district, we are required to provide services to that school district through what they call an ISP service plan. So we have a whole methodology on how to do that, and when we get funds, those schools are entitled to part of those funds by us. What kinds of questions can we answer? We threw a lot of stuff at you.
Okay, so on the funding part, the Part B is, that's the federal, and that's the pass-through.
Correct.
The APC is from the state. Now, is that when it comes, when we get the legislature does the simulation, it breaks down the foundation, the complexity, and at the bottom it kind of has the different categories. Is that in that?
That is in that form.
Is that in
Yeah,
that thing?
yeah, it's
Okay.
preliminarily in that form.
And I think it actually gets listed as just one number that says special ed.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, so that's where that's coming from. Okay, so the maintenance of effort, you said local, so what is?
That's money that comes out of our general
Education
fund
fund.
or education fund that continues to support students with special needs.
Okay,
So many of our teachers are paid directly through that fund. So we spend a lot of time differentiating where students are being paid for, or where staff is being paid for.
okay,
Because we have to also track. We have students going to Bristol for our program for students with emotional disabilities. That transportation is an expense that we can actually balance as a maintenance effort, because it's the local school district's way to maintain effort towards supporting students with special needs. When we buy a piece of equipment that we're paying for out of the education fund, that piece of equipment can come out again, as well as salaries that are covered.
thank you.
Yeah. Anything else? I feel like we may be off the hot seat here. Yes, I think we're okay.
Thank you for the amount of work you guys have done and the improvements that have been made these last 2 years, particularly, and even just this year since March.
I'm
Also glad that you're well, believe this.
Thank you. Well, I have to share with you, and I'm going to share the same thing I did with Lisa. Lindsay and Lindsay are amazing, amazing staff members. When you talk to principals around our district, they will share with you they are great resources, they are very knowledgeable, and they help make sure everything gets done, not in a timely fashion, but in an impressive fashion. I think one of the most important things of running a good team is making sure that you have people smarter than you on the team. And I definitely am blessed to have Lindsay as part of the team. At that, they promised me to buy me dinner if I said that phrase.
You should be, like, well, of course, Tony, but you guys should really be proud of yourself. It is very nice to hear people speak so highly of both of you. Yeah, you're welcome. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you all very much.
We will adjourn until 7 PM for our public meeting.
think those were placeholders that.
What does it say?
No, nada. I think maybe it's right.
Guys are married people.
Empty, shallow.
Yeah. Thank you.
I think it's that gibberish placeholders.
Well, I also, yeah.
Yeah, right.
Nothing.
I'll take them on. That's fearless, man. Yes, sir.
Oh, okay. I don't know. Who is it? Oh,
But it's like a placeholder, so somehow it didn't get corrected. It's the wrong one, so you just need to check.
oh, I'll just give it to Brenda. She just ran these off for me.
Okay.
Yeah.
I looked at that and I'm like, huh, what?
I printed them. I printed the whole thing. That's an interesting placeholder. Couldn't you say like first and last?
Nope, nada.
Nope.
Nope, nada.
Love with that, but she has to remember that even if she doesn't agree with people, we can't like be combative with all of our, you know, constituents. I mean, or tell people that want to speak that if the other side yells loud enough, the man will come back out and we have a plan of action and that's what, I mean.
I put it on Brenda's desk and she'll fix it and then I'll just give it.
Run it again.
Thank you.
Okay. That will be good to say,
Okay.
Probably.
rather than there's nada.
No pay nada.
No pay, nada.
No pay nada.
No, you can call me no.
Do I sit? I sit or I go?
Okay. I'll sit.
Okay, well, that clock's apparently slow. I've been watching it, 7:02.
I'm 7:02. They're late, sir.
Please rise and join us in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Mrs. Mullins?
The Elkhart Promise, every student is known by name, challenged and supported by highly effective staff, and in partnership with the community will graduate career, college-ready, and life-ready.
Thank you. At the end of the meeting, you'll have an opportunity to address the board if you wish. You have 3 minutes. There are white forms on the desk, or on the seats. Fill it out at the back. Give it to Mrs. Ott, and then you will have that opportunity to talk. So right now, we'd like to hear from Peyton Sheldon.
Good evening, everybody.
Good evening.
Peyton Sheldon. I am a senior at Elkhart High. I'm involved in SLCC and also student government and ECS. A little bit about me. I am a football manager. I have been managing for 4 years. This is my first year managing basketball, and I have participated in unified track for 3 years, and I'm going on my 4th year upcoming season. And I also do our internship program. This semester, I am at the school working with our special education program, which is what I'm going to be talking about today. So, what cool things the social media kids are doing. First off, they go to music class. So in music class, they learn the fundamentals of music. They also participate by playing on the drums. We sing little songs while playing the drums and do rhythm chants. We also do free dances, which gives them the opportunity to like get up and dance around, you know, get their energy out. We also do fun activities. There's always a game whenever we have music class. Sometimes we do a parachute game where like they all grab onto the parachute and then, you know, toss the little puppet that's in the middle while singing songs. We have this alligator that a group of kids would hide around the room, and we do the crescendo game. So the closer that the kids get to the alligator, the louder everybody starts singing. This is a picture of one of our wheelchair-bound students, his name is Jennifer. He is participating in the parachute, which was really cool to see because normally he doesn't participate in any of that stuff. And then the furthest picture to the right is Mrs. Wyrick. She's our music teacher, and we are learning about the Zydeco music. Up next, the kids have bazaars. So for these bazaars, the kids make certain decorations and little crafts. Recently, they made a bunch of candles and bath bombs, which makes our room smell really good because they do it in our kitchen. They also like paint little artworks and then paint bottles, and they're making ornaments. This is teaching them good motor skills. It allows them to work together as a team to get the finished product. They also learn a work ethic by, you know, working together and being able to sell everything. Here's some pictures of some of the bottles that they're making, and then all of us making the Christmas ornaments. We're selling these at the bazaar December 9th and 10th, I believe. It is for anybody, gen ed kids or teachers who want to come by and things. We have that. Up next is our coffee cart at the Kindness Cafe. These are two different operations. So the coffee cart is run by Mrs. Moulton, and she has a group of kids that come out, and there's a bunch of teachers throughout all three buildings that can buy coffee. And the kids will go into the kitchen, actually pick out the coffee, handwrite on the cups with the room numbers. And then once they're all done, they'll take the creamers and they'll wheel their little cart around to the different rooms and start selling it, and, you know. And then for the Kindness Cafe, that is run by Mrs. Wyrick, and that is for the schools of study. There's little baskets in the schools of study office where the teachers or principals of that school of study can buy. There's little snacks like chips, granola bars, whatever. And also the kids, they sell whoopie pies, and Mrs. Moulton and gets a group of kids and she makes whoopie pies. And, you know, it's a pretty big hit. A lot of the teachers like it. A lot of the kids enjoy doing it. And so here's a picture of us yesterday after doing the coffee cart. They've had a lot of orders this past week, about 10 to 12, both Monday and Tuesday. And then a little menu for the Kindness Cafe. And yeah, pretty much what the special needs kids are doing. It's a lot of fun. They enjoy doing it. It gets them around, gets them to know teachers. And
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. That was awesome.
We'll now move on to our consent items. We have a motion.
Second.
We have a second. We will do roll call for Mr. Scott.
yeah, we have to.
We do discussion.
We will do discussion first.
Okay, just one gift acceptance for Woodlands with the $25,000 for the playground equipment from Rex and Alex Martin. Is it?
Alex.
Yeah, well, no, but it's Rex and Alex, but it's just essentially from Rex and Alex, yes. But think about this. In October, they got $10,000 for the playground. Now they're up to $35,000. So it's gonna be a heck of a playground, so that's good.
We appreciate their generosity. Is there any other discussion from the board? Any discussion from the audience?
Kelly Mullen,
Aye.
Babette Bowen,
Aye.
Ann Vondermellen, Scott,
Aye.
Casey Davis, Rocky Enfield.
Aye. Now, old business.
Under the COVID update, you have the numbers for you over the last couple of weeks. And as you can see there, that the week of the mask mandate, 58 or 56 positive cases, 60 last week. And then so far this week, we had 20 yesterday and Serena Stevens updated me with 11 today, in terms of student positives and 3 staff for 34. Also, just wanted to address generally to make sure that you noticed in an email that was sent to you that we had information that our students who are involved in cardiology and our EMT program, because they do that work through Beacon Hospital, Beacon is requesting that those students get vaccinated in order to do that. We are checking into and making sure what options are available to students across the spectrum and being able to do or not complete their work through Beacon. So we're just asking that while that's creating a little bit of a stir for people, let us check into that and make sure, and then we'll communicate that out clearly to everybody as to what can happen.
And you'll follow up on if the religious, medical, or personal exemptions would apply to the children that Beacon allow for their
We're
employees.
asking for the most, for their
Okay.
most recent policy and what they're expecting in terms of that. Yep.
Okay. Mr. Thorne?
Yes, this evening, we are presenting a revised proposed meeting schedule for 2022. We all know we're meeting on Tuesday night. This was initially presented to you on November 9th. I'm a little bit disappointed in you all. None of you noticed that we've actually scheduled a board meeting for Thanksgiving. Fortunately, Susan saw that and made the change.
Thanksgiving's never on a Tuesday. How could you do that?
Thanksgiving. So you didn't pass that particular test, but we are seeking approval to revise meeting schedule, which is in your package.
Well, I put it in my book for next year in the correct day, so.
Well, kudos to you. You probably saw that when you reviewed the board packet.
Yeah.
Mr. Thorne, I have an important thing to ask about the meeting schedule.
Yes, sir.
Were you able to avoid all IU games, unlike tonight?
As much as I tried, I tried to consult with the coaching staff, and we will send a copy of this to the coaching staff in Bloomington, so that perhaps they can be cognizant of our meeting schedule.
Okay, thank you.
What is
We
the game?
appreciate
Is it?
There was a game that started 8 minutes ago, so.
We will share this post page. It's already published on the website, so I'm sure they're looking at that.
I'm sure they are.
They built their
I'm sure
schedule,
they are.
everything.
Okay. So are we ready to approve this? Any discussion from the board, other than IU games?
Well, since it's not hockey, I'm fine with approving it.
We have
Oh, yeah.
motion or
Move to
second.
approve.
Second.
There we go, thank you.
Any other discussion? Any discussion from the audience?
Kelly Mullen,
Aye.
Annette Bowling. Aye. Ann Fondervellen.
Aye.
Troy Scott.
Aye.
Thank you. Casey Davis.
Aye.
Rocky Henderson.
Aye.
Thank you very much.
Dr. Shepherd?
Good evening.
Good evening.
We are bringing to you this evening the proposed 2022-2023 school calendar for initial consideration. And as you have looked over that, I just want to highlight a couple things on here. Notice that the teachers will return on August 9th, should you approve this proposed calendar. Students will start on the 11th. You will also notice that the calendar is very similar to this school year's calendar, a couple of minor changes. We have the same number of e-learning days as this year's school calendar. However, this school year, they are all on a Monday. The calendar committee felt that Mondays are intruded upon too much because of holidays and other things. And when you take a look at elementary special schedules and the high school schedule with the AB block and things like that, Mondays were impacted too much, so we spread those e-learning days on other days, Tuesdays, Wednesdays, and Thursdays on this proposed calendar. Also, you'll notice that in December, the last student day and the end of the second grading period, or the end of the first semester, is the 22nd. Then school will resume on the 9th of January. What that does is it allows school to end on Thursday, the 25th of May. And we as you can see, we're able to put a yellow flash right on the Friday the 26th. Should we have another event like this year where the electricity went out and we could not start school, we have an extra day here where we can still have school and still be out in time for Memorial Day. So we have jokingly called that the Dr. Tallheimer Day. So we hope we don't have to use that day, but it's there just in case we need to do so. And just so you know, we have talked with Tony Giannessi and his crew in terms of classified staff that they will not lose any days on this calendar. There will be other opportunities for them to make up those e-learning days. For example, once again, there are no snow days. Make up snow days on here. We will use e-learning days if it snows. I guess we will see how that goes this year if we have any inclement weather days. You will also notice that this year we got pretty close to making the 2 semesters same. You will see that fall semester there are 89 student days and spring semester there are 91. I think this is about the closest we've ever done it in the years that I've been here. So we're pretty happy that the calendar committee was able to do that. So unless you have any questions, we just are presenting this for your initial consideration and not asking for something.
Thank you. Mr. Scott?
Good evening. The first item is something I bring to you each year. It's a resolution for transfers of appropriations. It does not require any additional expenditure. It merely realigns the budget account by account with dollars the way that we spend them. So with that, Mr. President, I ask the board for a motion.
Okay. Do we have a motion?
Move to promotion.
We have a motion and a second. Do we have any discussion from the board? Do we have any discussion from the audience?
Kelly Mullins,
Aye.
Babette Bowling.
Aye.
Ann Zondervan. Joyce Scott.
Aye.
Stacy Davis.
Aye.
Rocky Hanfield.
Aye.
Thank you. The next item is new information that we'll start providing each month related to ESSER spending. There's a narrative for each of the amounts, the ESSER 1, which was CARES, 2, and 3. Those narratives have been on our website under Administration and Business Office for a number of months. We're adding charts that are showing how we're doing on the spending in the various categories. So the narratives describe what type of things are being spent in each category, and then you can flip to the charts and see how we're doing. So ESSER, the first ESSER, the CARES money, was available through September of 2022. You can see we spent a fairly large portion of that. The second ESSER that came out, it actually is through 2023. We've just started really dipping into that pretty well. Much lower percent, and then the same is true for the third ESSER our month. So just informational, and you'll see that each month.
Thank you.
Is there if you have to go through to administration, how did you say to find it on the website?
So if you look at administration, and then under administration, there's business office.
Okay.
And so that's where we have budget postings, and we've also added the ESSER. So the narratives have been out there a while, and we're going to add the charts so that everyone can access those and see how we're doing.
Okay.
Great question, thanks. Okay, moving on to the financial report. The business office reports that at the end of October 2021, our cash balance is $30,755,932.96. Along with the detailed reports for the education fund and operations behind it. They've all seen cash improvement. Some of that is helped by the CARES and ESSER 1 spending that we've been utilizing. So we're in good financial shape. So that concludes my comments on the financial report. And then finally, for me, the monthly insurance reports. I grabbed it. Current month, October versus October last year, we were actually ahead about 84,000. You know, we've had a rough year, and we talked about that. We were still significantly higher than last year, but COVID spending for medical claims was way down. Elective procedures were off the table last year during COVID. We're still almost 900,000 ahead of the expected claim cost. So in that regard, we've been doing okay. So with that, that concludes my comments on the insurance.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Do you have comments from the audience? Trustee Sellers? Please state your address and your name.
54577 Princess Avenue, Selkirk. My name is Tricia Sellers.
Thank you. Yep.
2 weeks ago, I was driving in my car and I heard, okay, community schools have dropped their mask ban. And I was, what? That's kidding me. I was stunned. Of course, that was true. And then I heard the rationale was that 5 and up can now get vaccinated. The unfortunate thing is you couldn't be fully vaccinated at that point because they had just approved for that age range. So I think masks are easy to lower the spread, to decrease the spread. And I think it's just an easy, it's smart. Like a no-brainer. I don't understand it. What else should I say? I guess I should have thought more, but I hadn't really planned on coming tonight. But I know 2 weeks ago I was stunned, and I've been a substitute teacher at Elkhart Community Schools for a while. I have a daughter that's soon going to be a teacher. She's graduating from college. And, you know, I just think it's an easy thing to do to try to mitigate the spread of the virus. So, I don't know if I have a question. Am I allowed to ask a question?
We won't answer, but you can ask.
Oh. There's no 3-minute opportunity. It's just a 3-minute opportunity to talk. Okay, so I'm in support of putting the mask back on. No harm. Kids don't mind wearing them. It's not a big deal. Parents are making a big deal about it. That's my comment.
Okay, thank you. Jody McDonough.
Good evening. Jody McDonough. I live at 21359 Morse Place in Bristol, Indiana. My son is a senior at the high school. I just wanted to take the opportunity to thank the board members who listened to parents. And I was originally going to send an email, but I thought it'd be more appropriate to publicly thank you for listening to parents like myself and others who have spoken at board meetings, and medical experts who have also spoken at board meetings and voted yes to give the parents the right and the choice to mask our children or not. A lot of times I think you guys take a lot of heat and you get a lot of criticism. And so this is just one time from me that I would like to thank you for listening to our voices and giving our kids the choice of whether or not they have to wear masks. I can tell you that mine does not like to wear masks. Anyway, so just thank you and have a good Thanksgiving.
Indeed. Dr. Tallhammer?
Through most of my communication with staff through the month of Thanksgiving, I've talked about Thanksgiving and November being a month of gratitude. So I just want to use this opportunity to thank parents and students who put their trust in us and continue to be patient with changes and challenges that we have, and to say thank you to our staff and the people who continue to come in every day and pour into our kids. So I just wish everybody to be able to enjoy the next few days and however you do with family or friends, and to just voice my gratitude to everybody for everything that they do.
Comments from the board? If you have time, in 8 minutes from now, the Elkhart Lions will be tipping off at Northside Gym for the very first basketball game of the 2021 basketball season. If you hurry, do not speed, but if you hurry, you have time to make it and to see the game. With that, we're adjourned.
You know who they play?
Yeah, they're playing South Bend, Washington.